Hello guys, you are seeing Prime News Australia, where we show you the latest and important news of Australia in the fastest and reliable way. So come, let's start by not delaying. 25 big updates of the Australia, especially for you. Before proceeding in the video, comment by commenting from which state you are watching, and also like video, so that YouTube can reach this video to more people of Australia. Australia is examining all options to counter new 15% tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump on imports from all countries, including Australia. Trade Minister Don Farrell described the tariffs as unjustified and said the government is working with the embassy in Washington to assess impacts and explore responses to protect Australian exporters and trade relations. A bushfire east of Melbourne at Gaffney's Creek remains out of control, burning over 1,100 hectares since Thursday. Residents are urged to evacuate as the fire spreads, with emergency services monitoring conditions amid challenging weather, highlighting ongoing bushfire risks in Victoria during the late summer period. South Australian Labor pledges a $70 million package, offering over $100,000 in stamp duty waivers for empty nesters to downsize from large family homes to smaller ones, aiming to free up housing stock and support older residents in the lead-up to state elections. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese rejected calls for immigration cuts or tighter border controls in a Sky News interview, insisting existing checks are sufficient, despite rising support for the far-right One Nation party in polls ahead of potential federal and state contests. First Nations leaders and advocates gathered at the Together for Treaty National Summit in Melbourne, renewing calls for a federal treaty and truth-telling process. Victoria's progress was praised as a model, while some states face criticism for hostility toward reconciliation efforts, amid broader pushes for national recognition and justice framework. An Australian warship, HMAS Toowoomba, conducted a routine transit through the Taiwan Strait as part of Indo-Pacific operations. China's Navy tracked and monitored the frigate, highlighting ongoing regional tensions and Australia's commitment to freedom of navigation in contested waters. Australia's chef de mission for the 2026 Milano Cortina Winter Olympics, Elisa Camplin-Warner, urged increased government funding for future Winter Games following the team's historic performance. Medalists Cooper Woods and Danielle Scott were named closing ceremony flag bearers, though heavy snowfall delayed some events. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese deflected questions on potential changes to capital gains tax discounts ahead of Senate inquiry hearings starting in Melbourne. The Select Committee examines the investor-friendly tax breaks operation amid debates over fairness, revenue, and housing market impacts. Severe weather warnings persist with widespread rain, thunderstorms, and potential flooding across central and southeastern Australia due to a humid air mass. Authorities advise residents to monitor conditions, prepare for damaging winds, and avoid flood-prone areas as the unstable pattern continues into the weekend. Farmers express anxiety as Australia nears signing a long-awaited free trade agreement with the European Union within weeks. The National Farmers Federation pushes for a high-quality deal but worries about potential trade-offs in agriculture that could affect market access and domestic protections. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke used the Terrorism Act to issue Australia's first temporary exclusion order, barring an ISIS-linked woman in Syria's Al-Roj camp from returning for up to 2 years, with possible managed return conditions later amid national security concerns. The government rejected media reports claiming it is actively repatriating 34 women and children, families linked to IS militants, from a Syrian camp, with Burke denying preparations despite earlier releases and ongoing debates over humanitarian versus security priorities. Burke described Pauline Hanson's comments on Lakemba as a potential national security risk, escalating political tensions around immigration rhetoric and community impacts in multicultural areas during rising far-right political activity. A man was charged with a hate crime after a truck rammed into the gates of Brisbane's largest synagogue, the latest in a series of anti-Semitic attacks targeting Australia's Jewish community, prompting calls for stronger protections. Police investigate potential links between car fires and the kidnapping of Sydney grandfather Chris Begsarian, releasing images of a burnt-out vehicle as part of the probe into the mistaken identity case. A Reservoir grandmother was killed in her driveway after being struck by a car in Melbourne's north, leading to a man being charged with murder as investigations continue into the circumstances. Elisa Camplin-Warner, Australia's chef de mission, called for increased funding for future Winter Olympics following the team's historic performance at the 2026 Milano Cortina Games, emphasizing support for athletes after strong results. The process to ban Islamist group Hizb ut-Tahrir under new hate laws has begun, with Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke confirming the initial steps toward listing the organization to address extremism concerns. Heavy rain, flooding, and thunderstorms are forecast across Australia's east coast and parts of every state/territory due to a humid, unstable air mass, with warnings for damaging winds and potential severe weather impacts. Severe thunderstorms with damaging winds hit parts of the Pilbara region in Western Australia, prompting a monitor conditions alert from authorities as roads face possible closures and safety risks. Childhood vaccination rates continue to decline in Australia, raising public health concerns among experts about potential outbreaks of preventable diseases in communities. Australians have a last chance until February 27th to submit voice messages for the Voyager Project's 50th anniversary initiative, recording responses to "What would you like the universe to remember about our story on Earth?" for broadcast into space. South Australian election campaigning officially kicked off, with One Nation's performance seen as a testbed for federal ambitions and warnings of potential humiliation for Liberals in traditionally challenging ground. Burke defended the single ISIS bride exclusion order, while Albanese claimed the previous Morrison government allowed 40 ISIS members back into Australia, fueling political blame shifting on national security. Ongoing calls for Australia to accept citizens trapped in deteriorating conditions at Syria's Roj camp, including reports of nightly raids and violence amid humanitarian pressures. Local news bulletins in Sydney and Melbourne covered weekend stories, including investigations into high-profile cases like Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and winter sports initiations for Aussie Olympians. One Nation leader Pauline Hanson launched the party's South Australian campaign, focusing on immigration and aiming to capitalize on shifting voter sentiments. Weather instability triggered severe thunderstorms in central Pilbara, with authorities advising caution for motorists and potential infrastructure disruption. Broader political commentary highlighted the Liberal Party's challenges in adapting to urban voter preferences amid debates over Trump-style politics in Australia. Reports emphasized the imminent EU trade deal's potential benefits and risks for Australian agriculture, with farmers on edge over final terms after years of negotiations.